Good morning again, everybody. It's Michael here with your latest supply and demand market report. This video is going to be looking at the energy markets, crude oil, Brent crude that is, and natural gas. I hope you've all had a good trading week and that you've traded safe. Just before we start, please remember, as always, that this is purely for educational purposes. It's not a solicitation to do anything with your money, as I'm not a financial advisor and I don't know your personal circumstances. And with that out of the way, let us begin where we left off with crude oil last week. So crude oil had a really decent week, didn't go very far, but it's traded inside the previous week, although the range was not too bad. It did come into one of the two levels we were watching last week, so we were talking about it coming into possibly here, which it did, obviously, or going lower there. It's come into the first one and it's gone higher, so I'm sure some of you may have taken that trade. And as we discussed last week, it's gone through that level, so we can take that one out now. And it's a market that it's still overall still in this type of range, but it is beginning to show strength within that range, trying to negotiate through this supply zone that it's still in. So that's the next hurdle for it. But for now, it is looking strong. It's looking like it does want to go through that level. The attempts to sell it at this daily supply so far have not been effective, and the market has continued to rise. So if we can get through that supply zone, obviously it'll have all of these ones up here. You have that one first, and ultimately, as we said, this big one in here. So those are the levels that it still has to go through. It is showing strength within the range. People who are long from the lows here will be taking some profit. Whether new money then comes in, if this starts to hold, if I just open this a bit wider, if this starts to get up into these levels and refuses to start going back into these lows, but forms a new sort of support level around a demand zone, that will be bullish for crude oil, but we don't know yet. For now, it is still within a wider range. If you're looking for a long-term trade, that would be a market that is clearly bottoming, as we've drawn in before. It's still, if we look at traditional trend lines, sort of moving to the right side of that trend line. So again, that's a sign of the strength that is showing. The fact that it's held these lows in here as well is another sign of strength, and it's moving through the gears to try to get through these levels. Still a lot of work to do, but signs of promise in crude to the upside. Okay, now in terms of what happens going forward, there isn't anything right now. If this market comes down, just before we leave it and go to natural gas, if it does come down, it would still be a buy. We would still consider that an opportunity, obviously depending on other factors and how it returns and all of that, and where the profit margins are. But for now, if it does return in a decent fashion, we would still be looking for opportunities to buy and not necessarily sell, but that will be playing the weekly chart, not the daily. We'd be looking to play the weekly chart to see if it holds and forms, as I said earlier, a new support level higher than this one here. Yeah, so that's what we're looking at. And finally, let's go to natural gas. And natural gas also had a very strong week. We can now clean up these arrows. It is also holding a higher demand level, breaking the momentum to the upside and leaving behind demand zone. So in natural gas, we have a new demand zone that is forming or has formed. It needs to be evaluated, of course. I'm just pointing it out to you. Please do your due diligence on the level, see if it meets your criteria. And obviously there's a lower level just below that, right into there. So sort of level on top of level scenario you've got there. Ideally, I'd like it to go above this high before we pull back, but it's not too bad in that it has gone above that high, of course. So it's not too bad. It's a decent opportunity. So let's see how natural gas plays out. It still has to negotiate this area, which is on the daily, you'll see that's a whole big supply zone. I think I mentioned before the way it has come down from that level. If I open up this, the way it came down from this level here in a very methodical, slow, definitive fashion, not really major aggressive selling, just flagging after a big rise and not being able to take out this demand zone. They're all signs of strength. They're all signs of a market that doesn't have a lot of sellers into it. So as we're trying to bottom out and taking the highs out, it may be time to look for opportunities to go long, to see if we can ride it out of this range. This is the kind of pattern I was just describing as a possibility in crude oil, that we may end up with a higher range being formed compared to the lows that we were looking for it to come down here. You'll notice obviously it didn't come down to these levels because the buying passion, the buying aggression has increased. So and there isn't that much selling to counterbalance it. So that's why it's not made a play for these lows down here, not for these lows down here, but forming a higher shelf up there. Okay, so that's natural gas for you, trying to break out of a decent range. It's been in it for maybe 3 or 4 months now. So let's see how that pans out. Okay, thank you all for watching. Appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you had any questions or wanted to come on to the mentoring program, it's storehouseanalytics@gmail.com. See you all next week. Trade well and trade safe.